Hello everyone, I'm Lord Pog and welcome to Lord Pog Gaming. So this is going to be another one of my rant videos like the one I did about Bethesda, which if you haven't seen that one, I guess go watch it if you're a huge fan of Skyrim or any of Bethesda's properties. I pretty much just kind of go off on their business model and everything. If you get any background noise in this video, I'm sorry. It is still fairly early here where I'm at, and so there's a lot of traffic still going on through my house, as I don't really have a dedicated space for recording any of this. But these rant videos tend to be pretty informal anyways, so it's just more like me having a conversation with a friend, which you all are my friends, by the way, and me just basically complaining about the state of certain companies in gaming, really. So today I wanted to talk about Blizzard Entertainment. Now, for some of you, that might not mean anything, because you might not be actual Blizzard fans, you know? You might not think of any games that Blizzard has made that you enjoy particularly. But as a sort of old head in gaming, and when I say that, I mean, you know, I had a Texas Instruments. I mean, that was one of my first gaming consoles, was a Texas Instruments, and if you don't know what that is, you should look that up, because they're pretty wild. It doubled as a little gaming console, a small short-range television that was in black and white, a small short-range radio, and it would like flip around, and it was completely wild. It had an antenna attached to it. It was different. Had a dial that you turn so you could tune into the frequencies and stuff. Anyways, it's not to go off on a tangent there. As an old head in gaming myself, or a sort of old head, it has come to my attention that Blizzard is just, it's not the company that I knew. And when I say that, one of the first games I ever played was a real-time strategy game called not World of Warcraft, just Warcraft. World of Warcraft still wouldn't come around for another few years or so. Oh, my dog, he's chewing on a squeaky toy, so I'm really sorry if you can hear that. Kratos, stop it. Anyways, but yeah, Warcraft was probably one of the first real-time strategy, if not the first real-time strategy games that I ever played. And I instantly loved it. Blizzard has had some hits on its hands, folks. It came out with Warcraft's 1, 2, 3. It came out with StarCraft. It even made a little retro game called The Lost Vikings. And I just absolutely adored that game for the Super Nintendo. And I also did a retro review on that, by the way. If you haven't watched that, you might check it out, I guess. I mean, you know, I don't want to shamelessly plug anything, but, you know, I love that game. It was one of my favorite Super Nintendo games ever, so Blizzard has had a special place for me because it's had some hits. You know, Warcraft got me through some hard times in my youth, and I was in 7th grade. I was feeling kind of awkward. Little background. I was in 7th grade. I was feeling kind of awkward because it felt like I had stopped growing. Not as a person, actually growing. Like, in elementary school, I was always kind of a tall kid, and then all of a sudden, middle school came around, and everybody just shot right up. And I kind of stayed the same size, and suddenly I was feeling small and awkward. And I had been homeschooled for a few years, which there's nothing wrong with homeschooling, but I had been homeschooled for a few years, so I was, you know, kind of awkwardly trying to relate to people again my own age. And yeah, I kind of felt alone, and my folks actually bought me Warcraft, and it was on floppy disks, which if you know, you know, floppy disks aren't actually floppy, but there was like 7 of them things, and it took forever to load those games up. But then it did, and I remember chilling on that thing forever on the computer, just playing Warcraft. But what I want to really bring attention to is Blizzard's major comeback. You know, World of Warcraft has always been pretty good for them fiscally, but I feel like there was a game that they came out with that kind of set the world on fire, kind of brought new people, new eyeballs to Blizzard's product, and that was Overwatch. Now, love it or hate it, Overwatch changed the scene for the gaming scene for a minute there. I personally loved it. I loved the early days of Overwatch. I loved the days when you could hold an entire squad of people with just a Junkrat. And yes, that's a true story. I held an entire team at bay with just a Junkrat. It was great. You know, people hadn't figured out little metas and little, you know, capabilities of their characters yet, of the different characters. But, you know, I still managed to do it in those early days. And I just loved that game. I feel like what Blizzard did to kind of ruin their business motto there when it comes to Overwatch, and for all I know, the rest of their properties too. I haven't been keeping up with them ever since they allowed Overwatch to fall so badly. And you may be a big fan of Overwatch 2. I tried to play it, and I'm going to get into that. In the early days of Overwatch, it was all about get good. You know, we've all heard the term before. And I don't want to be misunderstood when I say get good, because get good doesn't mean you suck and so you need to either get better or quit. That's not what get good means. It means go beyond your potential. And that's really the purpose behind get good. It really is just a philosophy of gaming. If you choose to let it be, you can let it either deter you, or you can use it and go beyond your capabilities, because human potential is just an amazing thing, y'all. I felt like I was getting good at the game, and for you know, for all intents and purposes, I was pretty good once upon a time. In those early days, it was all about get good. It wasn't about and just a little breakdown of how Overwatch works. You know, it's a team shoot 'em up for first person shooter type of thing. What is that game called? Team Tower or something like that. I'm sure somebody's going to tell me in the comments, you know, down in my guest book. They're going to be like, it's called such and such, stupid. And I'm like going to be like, yeah, you're right. I'm pretty dumb, because I knew that. I think it's called like Team Fortress or something like that. But, you know, a team-based shoot 'em up deal where every character you pick has certain capabilities and they all serve certain roles. You know, you have your DPS, you know, the person whose job is really to kill a lot of people quickly. You got your tanks, you know, your meat shields who can't kill people quickly, but you don't really want to get tied up with them either, because they can kill you pretty easily. And you got your healers, basically your support, whose jobs are to heal and lay down a little bit of covering fire, but they're not the strongest at damage. And even in the beginning, in the early days of Overwatch, there was an actual fourth kind of character. I think they were called Defense, if I'm not mistaken, and their purpose was to kind of back up the tank in a sense. You know, protect the support. Excuse me, let the DPS kill, and you know, the tank acts like the meat shield for the DPS, while the defense acts like an extra round of support for both the tank and the support. These were the early days of Overwatch. And again, I can't reiterate this enough. It was about just figuring out what you were good at and then learning how to excel at it. The problem is that in games like this, that never lasts. Part of Overwatch's whole downfall, in my opinion too, and again, if you disagree with me, let me know down in my guest book. I'm not here to actually argue, you know, this is just what I see. Part of the downfall of Overwatch in particular was the players. You know, Mercy's too overpowered. Reaper's too overpowered. How am I supposed to fight this person if I have Reinhardt? You know, here's the thing. Reinhardt was one of my mains. And the way Overwatch works is for every character, there's some kind of other character who's supposed to kind of cancel them out. That way no one character is too overpowered. The thing is if you're actually excelling at your character and figuring out your particular favorite, if you will, your main, as they're called, you will figure out how to, you know, not necessarily kill them every time, but you can figure out how to defend against even those who are supposed to be your Reaper, you know, your Executioner, the one character that is supposed to be able to kill you the easiest. You can figure out how to take them out, at least some of the time. And at best, you can at least figure out how to defend against them, but that's the problem with players. They just start complaining because they're dying too much against this character or that character. So, Reaper's too overpowered. How am I supposed to, you know, and so on and so forth. And it just becomes this whining. And then the devs decide to just bow a knee. Blizzard just decides to bow a knee and start buffing some characters, nerfing others. Bless you, dog. Bless you. He just sneezed. Nerfing other characters. I mean, and then eventually it's not even becoming the same game anymore. It's really not. And for all intents and purposes, early Overwatch was really the most balanced game there was of its genre. You know, I get that in like Call of Duty and stuff, some of these weapons have to be nerfed or buffed, because maybe the devs made one way too filthy while the other one's way too weak. Okay, that's fine. You know, you want the players to try out every gun, and you don't want one weapon, not gun, but weapon. You don't want one weapon to not be used more than the other, and so on and so forth. You want a lot of mix and match in a game like that. In Overwatch, though, that's your weapon is your character that you're picking. And in those earlier days, it was pretty balanced. It really was. You just had to learn how to excel and not whine. Now, it's not all of the players' fault. Really, the biggest problem in that is the devs, is Blizzard itself taking a knee to all this and being like, well, instead of just showing people, you know, what they could have done was just show people how to play their characters a little bit, give them some inspiration, some insight into the character. Hopefully they themselves tried out the game and had a good idea. You know, back in the day, you could always tell on like old Nintendo games, especially the first Nintendo, you know, you could always tell the games that the developers cared about, because they were balanced games. Sure, Ninja Gaiden was hard, but it was doable. And you knew it was doable because you could tell that it was doable once you did it. Meaning that the devs not only made these outstandingly difficult levels, but they played through them themselves and figured out how to make them work. So the devs knew the tricks on how to play that game. As opposed to those games that are just so god-awful difficult that you know that they just slapped it together and didn't even test run it. Hopefully Blizzard test run their, you know, Overwatch, and if they did, then they should have been at least able to give the players some insight instead of just taking a knee and nerfing and buffing and changing people's abilities and this and that. I mean, it slowly started to become terrible, but it was still manageable. Then they get rid of the defense section and just make the DPS this huge group, and the tanks and the support become smaller. You know, there's less tanks and less support to choose from. That's part of the problem too, really, is the fact that they made the DPS such a huge roster, and that most of everybody just wants to play DPS and not tank or healer. That's another flaw. They really shouldn't have ever gotten rid of the defense play in the defense section. They should have just kept those guys defense and built them upon that strategy. That means that every single person playing on a team, you know, you got one DPS, one defense, one tank, one healer, or two support actually, because I think if I remember correctly, it was a 5-person team, you know? So you have 2 healers, 1 tank, 1 DPS, or 2 DPS, 1 defense, 1 tank, 1 healer. You know, you could mix and match it a little bit, but it got so bad. They lost so much control of it that they were halfway trying to force people into selecting their roles before even entering in a game. That's how bad it got. Instead of just balancing it out by returning the defense, you know, people to becoming defense players again, and putting those, no, they just, well, we don't want to take away from the DPS roster. Well, why not? You know, like, I don't get it, Blizzard. When did, you know, when did we become such cowards? It's not a bad game. You didn't do a bad job, per se. You're doing a bad job at running it. Blizzard has made a lot of mistakes in dealing with Overwatch in particular, and it just kind of shows on down the line. When was the last time we got a StarCraft game, like a good StarCraft game? When was the last time we got a, you know, World of Warcraft is still going. Henry Cavill plays it, you know, word to Superman. The Witcher, the actual Witcher, you know, the defender of our nerd culture. You know, he plays it, so that's cool. You know, I'm sure World of Warcraft, I'm sure, is a fine game. It's not really my cup of tea, but it's a fine game. I just don't believe in paying like monthly subscriptions when I've already paid like $60 for a game. I don't believe in that. I know that Blizzard made Diablo, and if I'm not mistaken, Diablo 3, I think, like totally tanked. I didn't really keep up with it. I kind of lost track after Diablo 2, which was, you know, chef's kiss. I love Diablo 2. I love Diablo 1. The feeling of loneliness that Diablo 1 gives is just unreal. You feel so secluded and so alone in that game. It's awesome. It's an eerie feeling. And Diablo 2 is just radical. I love playing the Paladin. I know a lot of people like playing the Barbarian, two-fisting weapons. Me, I love the Paladin. I love being able to walk in and smite evil with just this massive beam of holy light. So good. And then I think Diablo 3 didn't even really do that good. Maybe it was Diablo 4. I don't remember. Or did Diablo 4 just come out and that was the one that Megan Fox was promoting so hard? See, that's the problem, right? I can't even keep track of it. That's how, like, kind of uninteresting it is, really. You know, I was more interested in getting the Diablo 2 remastered and playing it online with friends than I was worried about getting their new stuff. Which, maybe I'm being too harsh on that. And if I am, let me know. You know, if I am, let me know. I'm always open for criticism and conflicting views and this and that, because opening up dialogue is what's important. That's what moves us as a society forward. Right now, I'm just basing my opinion, and Plato said, you know, opinion's just the wasteland between an argument and truth. As far as Overwatch goes, it's just not the same game. And it really just started going downhill when they opened up the Overwatch League. In particular, there was one player in the Overwatch League by the name of Jake. I believe he was with the Houston, or maybe it was Austin, but I think it was Houston team. I can't remember their names either, but this guy Jake, he was an Overwatch player, professional Overwatch player, and he's good, but man, for whatever reason, like, the announcers and just the league and Blizzard, it seemed like as a whole, I don't know if this kid's daddy like just donated money, helped them build the stadium for the league or something, I don't know, but they were just, I mean, kissing his backside hard. And the kid, I don't want you all to misunderstand me. I'm not a violent person, but he had one of those faces that just makes you want to punch, right? Like Theo Von said about Monster Energy drink, you know, some of those guys, they're just going home to, you know, some of those guys you watch drinking Monster Energy drink, you know, they're going home to punch, you know? This kid just had a face that made you want to punch. And he had that same kind of attitude too. Like, I just, you know, he got into some kind of conflict with XQC, but I'm not a huge fan of XQC either. Not that I got anything against him, but I don't watch him too much. But that's not even my issue with him. He just had this like attitude and this look, and he was good enough at the game, but he wasn't like some golden god. And they were just constantly being like, look at what Jake is doing. Jake is doing amazing. And he's just like running around in circles. He jumped up as Pharah one time, and not to go off on a tangent, but he like jumps up as Pharah one time and starts shooting rockets. And I think he hits like 2 people, but doesn't kill them. And they're like, and Jake goes ham. And I'm like, he hit 2 people with rockets, for crying out loud. That's not that great. I mean, and then he pops off his ultimate and really doesn't kill as many people as Pharah's ultimate should. And if you know who Pharah is, she's the Egyptian woman who flies around in the like eagle mech suit type thing, and her ultimate is her wings open up and she just fires rockets that really should be just a devastating move. Like, you hear her say, justice reigns from above. You hear that pop off, you gotta duck and cover, or she will kill you. And he did it, and it was just too easy for everybody to duck. And they're like, oh, look at Jake, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. Like, what did he do? And, you know, like, it's this whole business motto. Like, certain things just start irking me about these businesses, and it's things like that. Playing favorites, pay to win, nerfing and buffing things because people are complaining because they just don't want to excel at the game. As opposed to, it'd be one thing if the game wasn't balanced, but it, like I said, it was darn near perfect. Like, one of my mains was Reinhardt, who, let me explain Reinhardt to you. He's basically a mammoth of a man. This German guy, he's a mammoth of a man in this like power armor. Think Fallout. He's wearing power armor. He's got this giant hammer, this awesome like force field shield. He's a tank, and he's basically just like a knight, you know, and he's just awesome. He's got one long ranged attack, which is a flame strike. It's not very accurate, and most of the time if you're like trying to hit somebody who's flying around, like say Pharah, who is one of his counters, with that flame strike, it will go up there and reach her, but it's too easy for her to get out of the way. You know, you're gonna have to get lucky with it. However, I never let that bother me. Right? So what's the problem? You know, like it's a darn near perfect game. I never let it bother me that Pharah was one of my counters and that she was pretty deadly when it came to me. You know, I just figured out little ways of getting at her. That's all you had to do. But instead they're like, oh no, we better, you know, we better nerf Reaper, we better nerf this person or that person, this and that. And it's like, you're just taking a knee. That's the worst kind of motto there is. Especially, or model, that's the worst kind of model there is. Especially when it's pretty balanced. Especially when people just need to figure out the game. It's not really our fault, although I will say that as advice, and I'm not lecturing you, but as advice, if you're having a hard time in a game and you just keep dying and you keep dying, just keep at it. There's at some point, it's not because this character is stronger than your character. At some point, it's something you're doing. So you should figure it out. What are you doing wrong? If you really want to be that good at that game, it's this important to you, study your own gaming. Record it, film it, do whatever you got to do, I guess, and study it. Or just reflect on it. Figure out what you're doing wrong. And then get good. Then get good. Because it was capable once upon a time, and then it just became too hard to keep up with because now they're buffing and nerfing people, and so they'll buff this these characters and nerf these other ones for a little while, and then they'll just turn around and do whatever, and then that starts creating actual metas of gameplay, like the D.Va Winston meta. And then they turn around because that D.Va Winston meta is too strong. They turn around and nerf both of them, and so the meta has to change. And then instead of just balancing it out, saying, okay, well, if this is blah blah blah, let's just figure out a way to balance it. No, instead, and this is really what makes it Blizzard's fault more than the players. Instead, Blizzard figures out, well, if we buff and nerf people and blah 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 blah, we can control the meta. And if we introduce new characters, which, to credit Blizzard, in the beginning, they didn't make you pay for new characters. You bought the game, you got everything for free after that. So good on them for that, at least in the beginning. Once they figured out that they could buff and nerf at their own discretion, they started controlling the meta. And then they'd introduce a new character and be like, well, we really want players to like this character, so we'll just buff them to the max and make them really strong for a long time. And that I don't like that. I don't like that. Balance your game. If there really is something wrong with the game, then balance it. Don't control the meta. There shouldn't really be a meta. It should just be, people getting to enjoy the characters. They're the characters that they love. I really hated it when I had to stop playing tanks so much, because there just really wasn't a tank. They all seemed kind of nerfed for a while there. And so I had to go to support because everybody's wanted to do DPS, right? So I just went to support. I started maining Lucio. I had a few mains. I was mainly Reinhardt, D.Va, and Lucio. And if I had to play DPS, I just went with Soldier because he's the easiest to control. I didn't really care. Or Junkrat. Junkrat's a little bit nuanced to play, but once you figure him out, he's pretty easy. But that's another thing, they took away Junkrat's sticky bombs, and that was just a bummer. But those were my mains, really. And Zenyatta. To support either Lucio or Zenyatta, or Reinhardt and D.Va with a little bit of Winston. I could sometimes wreck it with Winston, or Junkrat and Soldier, or even what's his name, Bastion. Bastion's not a hard character to play either, but yeah, so I guess the point I'm trying to make is, with that all said and done, they just kind of wrecked their own game. They just really did. They quit caring about loving the game. And you might say to yourself, but Pog, isn't that what's important? What the players think? Isn't that what? Well, I'm kind of an old man. I'm almost middle-aged, and I'm gonna tell you, in all honesty, let me tell you, no, that's not what's important. I mean, you want players to play your game, right? But I'm gonna give a quote from Oscar Wilde. Art is not created with the audience in mind, only the artist. And that's an interesting quote, man. That really is, because what's that saying is you have to first be the artist who loves your own art. And if you love your art, that'll shine through, and the audience will love it too, because you'll have something in it. It'll be made with your own love. You'll have put yourself into your art, and that'll shine through and grab the attention of the audience. It's when you quit caring about that as much as the money, and that's really what it boiled down to. They wanted people watching Overwatch League, so they wanted sponsors. They wanted to push their merchandise and so on and so forth, and their new characters and this and that. They wanted people buying loot boxes and skins and this and that. And granted, it's not paid to win, but they're trying to push it like it's a store, like it's a brand. And for a hot minute there, it was a brand in its right, in its own right. I bought a box of Lucio's once and ate it. It was all right. I mean, it's all right. But yeah, and now we've got Overwatch 2. And they have just completely said, well, who cares? Who cares about balancing? Who cares about, free stuff? Now they do the whole, what do you call it? I can't even, every game does this now, just about, your season pass, your paid players versus your unpaid players, and the people who buy the pass get all the special stuff. And I even saw them introduce one of the new characters, and they were only available on the paid track or whatever. And so I'm like, well, are the unpaid people gonna get them eventually? And I think they did, but I think it was like it took forever, and that's not cool, man. And I hate that microtransactioning in gaming now. I hate that too, but that's a whole different subject. But it was like Overwatch originally felt like it was a balanced game made with love, telling a pretty cool story, really. And Blizzard understood that you're already paying a good chunk of money. I mean, $60 for a game. People could say, well, that's the times. That's too much. That really is too much to pay for a game plus buy subscriptions and this and that. That's too much, man. That's too dang much. So, and to be fair, Overwatch 2, if you have Overwatch 1, that's pretty much a free game, but you're paying this. And I guess they got to make their money somehow, in a sense, right? But I don't know, man. I think it would have just been easier to say, oh, no, we'll just have the people come out and buy the new game. People may bellyache about it, but at least you'll make your money, and then we can have the free stuff again without all the microtransactioning. But I have a feeling they'd still microtransaction us, just because the way they're running Overwatch now. You still have your different style characters. You have your tanks, your DPS, and your support. But when I was playing Overwatch 2, it just felt like everybody was just basically DPSing it. Like there's just no balance anymore. It's all about just get in there, kill, blah, blah, blah. Playing it like it's Call of Duty, and it's not Call of Duty. There's nothing wrong with Call of Duty, but it's not Overwatch. And Overwatch is not Call of Duty. It used to be about team strategy, and it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of team strategy on it anymore. Plus, a lot of their new characters are kind of lame. It's like they quit trying to make interesting, innovative characters. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being too much of a wimp about this. And if I am, let me know in my guest book when you sign it. I appreciate you listening to me rant on about this. Yep, it's just another game rant about another company whose business model I just don't like right now, and it's Blizzard this time. I want to say I'm honored by all y'all's presence, and I mean this with all my heart and soul. Thank you so much. Y'all come back now. Stay golden.
I did a flip. Range Melba.
Oh my god. Hog. Dude. How? Yeah. How could I miss that?